every time he speaks, you just wanna pow, pow, pow. Hey, what's up you guys? It's Avery and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who have never been here before, what's up? Glad you came to join. So a few videos ago, I posted a video about Jane Austen's persuasion and some of the important themes and analysis of those themes. So today I thought I would do a similar video, but this video is going to be about Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So similar to Persuasion, I also read this book over the summer when I was studying in Oxford and I was studying Jane Austen's work specifically. So we did kind of a deep dive on this book and about how it's a Gothic parody, which most people are aware of. But I think what most people aren't aware of is that it's not just a Gothic parody. I feel like when you think of Northanger Abbey, you think that Jane Austen has just written this parody of Gothic literature, kind of poking fun at it and making fun of the girls who believe in it and all those types of things, which she does do a little bit, but there's actually a lot more to it that's really interesting. But it's really a greater commentary on reading and literature in general during the Regency era, as well as some of the sexism that is kind of the foundation for some of these opinions about Gothic literature and other novels. So these are some of the fun things that we're going to explore in today's video. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you maybe learn a little something from it. So without further ado, let's just hop right into it and we'll start talking about Northanger Abbey. Also, this video will contain some spoilers. I'm not going to talk too much about specific plot points. It'll mainly be about themes, and I am going to talk about specific things that happen in the book, but I don't think there should be any huge spoilers if you haven't read the book yet. And if anything, I think it might be interesting to watch this video before you've read the book so that you can kind of have some of these things in mind as you're reading and you'll be able to notice certain things. But just be forewarned that there will be some references to things that happen in the book. So Northanger Abbey centers around reading and how what you read can kind of influence your preconceived notions of other people and certain events in your life. And Austen uses Gothic novels as the subject of some undue criticism in the Regency era, while also making points about how novels can shape and influence people's lives. And even though this book is, like I said, most notably known as a Gothic parody, Austen actually spends a good portion of the book defending novels and novelists from criticism that they're just unnecessary trifles. Austen also examines how the novels that women read can either empower them or dissuade them from making their own choices and, trying their hardest to create their own happiness during this time when there were so many things that they had no power over. So novels are the key element around which Northanger Abbey revolves, and how their themes and the prejudices that people back then had against novels can affect those readers, specifically the women readers. And as Henry Tilney puts it so expertly, the person, be it gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid. And I think if you're on this channel, if you are a book lover, then you can agree. So this novel is definitely something interesting for people who love to read and kind of like to see the effects that reading can have on people. So, like I said, though Northanger Abbey is often referred to as a satire or a parody of Gothic novels in the late 18th century and early 19th centuries, it's important to realize that it's not actually a critique of the Gothic novel themselves, but of its readers. Throughout the parody, Austen frequently defends novels, and Northanger Abbey is really interesting because there are actually a lot of instances throughout the novel that Jane Austen directly addresses the reader. And she says, "There seems almost a general wish of decrying the capacity and undervaluing the labor of the novelist, and of slighting the performances which have only genius, wit, and taste to recommend them." So in this passage, Jane Austen is outwardly describing her agitation and annoyance that novels are not taken seriously, even though they are, quote, "some of the work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed." So as a novelist, you can understand how Jane Austen would get fed up and annoyed that novels aren't taken seriously. I'm sure she's been in many social situations where specifically men belittle women in the novels that they read and feel them to be useless and just fill women's heads with all of these ideas. So an example of a male character and figure who really shows this disdain for novels is Mr. Thorpe. And he outwardly says, "Novels are so full of nonsense and stuff. They are the stupidest things in creation." So he's super fun. We love him. And it's just interesting how I just like to think that Mr. Thorpe is based on someone that Jane Austen unfortunately probably had encounters with. I'm sure there were men who belittled novels and writing, which, you know, probably really grinded her gears since that's what she loves. And as most people would agree, novels contribute a lot to society. Novels can change people and make them feel differently about certain things that they didn't know much about. Novels are very important. They've always been very important. This is something Jane Austen is passionate about, something I'm passionate about. So that makes Mr. Thorpe an extremely agitating character. Every time he speaks, you just wanna pow, pow, pow. So there's no denying that Northanger Abbey is a parody of Gothic novels. It definitely is. When Catherine goes to Northanger Abbey, there's all of these things that are reminiscent of Gothic literature. You know, she's staying in this old kind of creepy abbey. She hears things in the night. She finds mysterious notes and receipts. And so it is obviously a parody of Gothic literature. No one is denying that. But just because it's a parody doesn't also mean that it is putting down Gothic literature. Austen wouldn't adamantly defend novels like we've seen her do if she was going to spend the rest of her book tearing down Gothics, which were mainly female-written Gothics. So where does the actual critiquing come in? That is with our main heroine, Catherine. So throughout the novel, Austen isn't critiquing the Gothic novels that Catherine likes to read. She's critiquing Catherine herself for being an idiot. So if you have read the novel, you're aware that the main book that Catherine is kind of basing all of her fanciful ideas on is The Mysteries of Udolpho. And this is definitely one of those instances where living in the time period that this book came out would be really helpful, because personally I've never read The Mysteries of Udolpho. I don't know what it's about really. But if you had read this book, then you would realize throughout Northanger Abbey that something really funny about Catherine, and another reason that she's just dumb, is that it becomes obvious to the reader that Catherine has never finished The Mysteries of Udolpho. She talks about it constantly throughout the book, and she relates scenes from real life to the book, and that ends up encouraging her to make these really stupid assumptions. So she reads some of it and lets that lead her to all of these assumptions when she never even finished the book. So a scene where this becomes obvious that she hasn't finished the book is when she is driving in the carriage with Mr. Tilney on the way to Northanger Abbey. So as they approach Northanger Abbey, Mr. Tilney is kind of teasing Catherine by creating this scenario of mystery and horror and intrigue and all of these things that could befall her at Northanger Abbey. But while he's doing this, he is actually taking moments from The Mysteries of Udolpho, because he has also read this book, and he is basically taking moments from the book, twisting them and saying that those things could happen to her at Northanger Abbey, assuming that she would get the joke because she's talked about this book, and she doesn't, because she either hasn't read enough of the book or hasn't read up to these parts that Mr. Tilney is referencing. So all of these kind of funny jokes that he's making at her just go straight over her head. If she had read the book completely, then she would understand that he's just teasing her, but she didn't, and she assumes that all of these things he's talking about could be real and could really befall her at Northanger Abbey. She wouldn't have these crazy perceptions of General Tilney, who's Henry Tilney's father, because she would have finished the book and realized that the heroine at the end of that book was wrong about all of those things. But instead, she's just naive and dumb and living in this heightened Gothic perception. When Catherine realizes that she shouldn't have made all of these ridiculous assumptions after Mr. Tilney gets extremely angry with her. She blames Anne Radcliffe, who is the author of The Mysteries of Udolpho. Instead of thinking, maybe I should have read the whole book, should have figured out how it ended, instead of just putting myself into this book. So yes, Jane Austen is making a parody of Gothic literature, especially when Catherine is in Northanger Abbey and there's lots of great descriptions and scenery of the Abbey and it being, you know, dark and there's thunderstorms, and it is very Gothic. But at the end of the day, it's important to realize that Jane Austen is not making fun of Gothic literature and calling it unrealistic. She's making fun of Catherine and specifically readers who take these fun stories and apply them to real life. Because it is important to maintain a realistic head. Even if you love to read, you have to realize that life is not like stories and therefore are entertainment, and we can learn a lot from them, but we can't just assume that these things are going to happen in real life because they've happened in Gothic literature or any novel. Alright, so we've talked about the pitfalls of Catherine. And as a character, she can be really frustrating because she's just naive and allows things to influence the way she views the world in a negative way. But Catherine does exemplify some important traits and the important things that reading could provide women at this time. So vulnerable women and the type of reading that they do is an important theme in the book, and we can see this through Catherine, but also with a foil for her character, which is Eleanor Tilney, who is Henry Tilney's sister. So like Catherine, Eleanor also enjoys reading, but she reads a lot of histories. So it's proposed by a woman who actually read an academic paper of her, Miriam Fuller, that the distinction between the two women and their personalities can be based a little bit on the type of reading that they do. So Eleanor really trusts these histories, which, let's be honest, are male histories written by men and how men view the world. So a lot of history, as we know, isn't always correct because it's just a patriarchal view of history in general. So Eleanor loves these male-dominated histories, which kind of allows her to continue to be trapped by her father. While Catherine asserts a little bit of a different outlook. Her love of novels allows her to exercise a little bit more power than maybe other women felt like they had. Catherine's mother even says about her, "She is not a poor helpless creature, she can shift very well for herself." Saying that Catherine is, you know, she's not just this timid girl who is really meek and shy. She, you know, she can stand up for herself, she can speak for herself, which we see a lot throughout the book. An example of this is when Eleanor allows her brother to buy her muslin for her, whereas Catherine buys the muslin that she wants, even when it's against the wishes of her guardian, Mrs. Allen. Catherine continues to show the spirit by remaining determined to keep her appointment with the Tilneys, even after she's getting so much pressure from the Thorpes to reschedule. And when Mr. Thorpe so frustratingly intervenes, she literally breaks free of their grasps and runs after them to set it right. So yeah, she's a little naive, and the way she acts often goes against some of the social rules of the time. She acts a little outlandishly sometimes, but it's because you could say she's been inspired by some of the characters of the literature that she reads. That's something that Eleanor would probably never do because she hasn't been inspired by any of the characters that Catherine is. And even though Mr. Tilney does think that Catherine's a little naive and foolish, at the end of the day, this rambunctious spirit that she has is kind of what makes him fall in love with her. So though her reading of Gothic novels are the reasons that she creates these fanciful and unrealistic scenarios in her head, they are also the reason that she is able to kind of create her own happiness to the best of her ability and do what she wants to make herself happy, and she doesn't allow herself to be persuaded by the villains of real life like Mr. Thorpe. So talking about women and reading so much means we also should talk a little bit about the sexism that surrounded the hobby. It's not a coincidence that the only acceptable and intelligent forms of reading to men like Mr. Thorpe were books made for men. Gothic novels were mainly read by women, so of course they are unintelligent and trite and ridiculous. Like I mentioned earlier, Austen, an author, but also an avid reader, probably felt this criticism more heavily than maybe some other women did. It's obvious in her defense of novels that she resents the criticism of novels. She describes the persecution of authors as saying, "Although our productions have afforded more extensive and unaffected pleasure than those of any other literary corporation in the world, no species of composition has been so much decried." So she's basically saying, our novels do so well, and they are still just diminished. Critics are quick to tear them apart as being useless, even though Austen points out that these novels often have very nuanced critiques of society at the time, which is something we see in Austen's own writings. We have learned a lot about the Regency era, and especially the social norms and things like that of the Regency era through Austen's novels. So the sexism pervades, women are looked down upon for writing the novels, and then young girls who like these novels are also looked down on, and they are told that their reading tastes are worthless. So Jane Austen really kind of pops off, and she says, you know what? It's ridiculous that our novels get all of this criticism when a man will rewrite a history or an abridgment of some other boring book that another man has written, and he gets tons of praise. But no, our novels, they're no bueno. So I just think it's awesome that she said that, and she really said what she had to say. She said, "Tell me my novels are worthless." So to sum up, this book in general is it's a novel about novels, which is something that I really liked. And it really challenges the idea of what makes a good reader. So someone like Catherine is not a good reader because she only read a little bit of the book and allowed it to influence her life in these ridiculous ways. But she also allows Gothic literature to kind of bolster her and empower her to do what she wants and get what she wants, and not let people kind of persuade her to do things she doesn't want to do. So I would say if there's one thing that you come away from this video and from reading Northanger Abbey, is that yes, it is a parody of Gothic literature, but if in your head that means that it sounds like she is making fun of Gothic literature, that is not the case. She thinks that literature and novels provide a lot to society. They provide enjoyment and entertainment to tons of women, as well as men, as we see with Henry Tilney. We love Henry Tilney. He also loves novels, and he doesn't tear women down for what they like to read. And the book is really about Catherine being naive and learning that while novels are important, you still have to be a realistic human being in order to interact with others normally. So those are all my thoughts and a little bit of my analysis of Northanger Abbey. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have read Northanger Abbey, let me know what you thought about some of the things that I had to say. I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.